I had a life at the beginning that is the typical successful entrepreneur, money pouring in, everything you could wish for, big villa, swimming pool, 2 wonderful kids, beautiful wife, luxury cars, everything you can think of, and miserable, stressed out, angry all the time, completely unhappy and unsatisfied with life.
Mo Gawdat, former chief business officer of Google X,
3 times best-selling author.
Your job is to think the unthinkable, and that's AI.
You were my number 1 target.
Mo Gawdat has spent a decade devising how to engineer happiness.
Material wealth will never make you happy. The biggest asset you get is minutes. You're trading the most valuable asset you've ever been given, your life, for things that you don't need. 70 to 80% of all doctor visits are due to stress-related illnesses. It is the pandemic of our time. And burnout, it's the result of accumulation of stress over time. Anxiety is more interesting. When you feel anxious, it's not because you're trying to deal with something that's scaring you. It's because you believe that you do not have the abilities to solve it.
By 2045, AI will be 1 billion times smarter than humans. Have we created a monster?
We have absolutely 100% created our God. AI is going to become a utility where you plug into it and get 100 IQ points more. The interesting thing about grief is that the first step is not to do anything at all. When Ali left, first day after such a loss, you're not even able to sip a sip of water. Second day, start to drink water. Third day, you have a meal. When my brain tells me Ali died, you know what I do? I respond to my brain and I say Ali lived. So weird, huh? How instinctively wired we are to continue living. Constant negativity is a skill that we learn in the world. I learned to find happiness. My practice is very straightforward. Every time my brain will tell me something negative, I'll say, if you do that, life becomes a lot happier.
Hi, I'm Abbey and welcome to Exhibit A. On this week's episode, we'll be chatting with Mo Gawdat and Alice Law on how to live an unstressable life. Mo, what a privilege to have you on with us today. You know, when we came up with the idea to do this podcast, you were my number 1 target. I've listened to everything you've done. I've read your books, and I consider myself to be one of the most stressed out, manic people on the planet. So you were definitely my number 1 target. So thank you so much again. Obviously, I know who you are because I am one of your biggest fans, but please, can you explain to our listeners, if they don't know already, who is Mo Gawdat?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. The pressure of number 1 target. Now you're setting expectations that I'm certainly going to fail to meet. But I'm honored to be here. I love the name. I love your approach to the podcast, and I hope we're going to have the conversation you're looking for. I had 2 full lives, complete full lives. I had a life that was a tech executive. That went all the way to what I would probably consider the top of being a tech executive. I ended my career of 25 years as the chief business officer of Google X, where truly I had the honor of working with some of the smartest people on earth to build things that are shaping the world we are in today, including artificial intelligence and robotics and so on. Before that, I ran half of Google globally, so I opened, almost half of the business, 103 languages, 4 billion people using our product in my region. So it was, again, an incredible honor to bring technology to the world. My other life started in 2014 when I sadly lost my wonderful child, Ali. Ali was not a child at the time. He was 21 and a half. He was probably the absolute pride and honor of a father. Handsome, tall, wise, loving, kind. He went for a very simple surgical operation that went wrong, an appendix inflammation, basically. And we lost him. And when we lost him, my response was very, very unusual. Clearly, as I look back at it now, almost distant, if you think about it, because I started to write about happiness. I started to write everything that he taught me about happiness with a very interesting intention to sort of, I sort of said, okay, so Ali's physical form is no longer with us, but his essence can remain. And so I wrote with the intention of having a tiny bit of him, sent to the world through that book, my first book, Solve for Happy.
And, it was a mission. At the time, I had a mission called 10 million happy, that then very quickly became 1 billion happy because 10 million was achieved very quickly. And the idea was if I could share some of what Ali taught me about happiness with the world, and include my very unusual engineering approach to life, very logical, very methodical, then we could probably help a lot of people. And so, that life started, and it became my whole life. It became everything that I do. I quit Google in 2018. I quit in 2017, but could only leave in 2018. And basically dedicated my life to this, 1 billion happy, which I have to say is probably the best life you can ever choose to live.
I'm kind of lost for words. As a mum of 4 myself, I just can't imagine if something happened to my kids. I don't think I could be on this earth without them. How did you manage to pick yourself up and carry on?
I have to first say I pray deep in my heart that you never ever see any pain for any of them. It's the most unbearable, unnatural pain you can ever feel. Truly is. I never even fell, which is the weirdest place. I mean, neither I nor his mother, my ex-wife now, my wife then, there was something, I think it's maybe his energy or what he stood for, or maybe some kind of a knowing, if you're spiritual, that there was good in his departure, if you really think about it. But Ali, when Ali left us, we believe that he left 4 hours after the operation started, but there was this rule in Dubai hospitals that if a patient died less than 24 hours from admission, that the government would have to do a very long investigation. And so basically they kept him on life support machines for a very long time. And then eventually one intensive care doctor, who I think was ethical enough, walked me in and said, look, I really need to tell you the truth. I think your son will not recover. If he recovers, most of his organs have failed already, so he's probably not going to be a normal human at all. And you could see, and I know sounds really weird, but you could see a shift in our psychology from we want him to live, to actually feeling we don't want him to suffer, we don't want him to suffer, right? And so that was the very first bit of prep. And it's quite an interesting study in human psychology, because it's all very contextual. You wanting your son to live as the top alternative becomes secondary to you want him to not suffer, which is really your top priority as a parent. But I also have to say, I think there is a bit of a cultural side, an understanding of death. I don't know how spiritual you are, Abbey, but
I'd like to think I was quite spiritual, yeah.
I share that with you. I definitely don't think death is the end of us. Okay, I don't think birth is the start of us either, right? And it's quite interesting when you look at life. We come to this physical form of life through a portal called birth, and we leave this physical form of life through a portal called death. But life itself exists way before and long after. Okay, and when you start to see it that way, you start to realize, very interestingly, that I have absolutely no certainty whatsoever that I will live another day. Okay, but I have a ton of certainty that sooner or later I'll be in the same place where Ali is. Okay, it seems to me that you need to understand that dying is part of living, right? And that dying is not a disconnection. Dying is a disconnection if you're only anchored in your physical form, right? If you're connected to your spiritual form, I'm as connected to the love I have for Ali today as I ever have been. But the idea of grief is that it's so multi-layered. The number of emotions you're dealing with are just so confusing. It's not just the loss, okay, which is the primary emotion you could think, but it's also the worry. So what's happening to my son now? It's also the guilt. It's also the ego, right? So when Ali left, I remember vividly, it still hurts me until today, that the first thought I had in my head was you should have taken him to another hospital. You have to understand the subtlety of The ego of a parent, the role that we assume is that we're there to protect our children. I mean, Ali was tall, handsome, broad-shouldered, so wise. In all reality, when he was 21 and a half, when he left us, he was the one protecting me. Do you understand that? But yet my ego continues to say, I am a parent. I should have protected my son. Okay? How could you take him to the place where he died? And it's a very illogical emotion, because the truth is my son was in pain. I took him to the nearest prominent hospital in near my home to alleviate his pain, to remove his pain. And the doctor that did the surgery for Ali did 420 surgeries of those in his life. Okay, so in hindsight, you'd look back and say, "Oh, how could you let that guy operate on Ali?" But the truth is, he was the perfect guy at the moment to do that. That's one thing. Another thought that attacked me very, very severely was the thought that the doctor murdered your son. Okay, again, not true at all. Again, which surgeon wakes up in the morning and says, "Okay, today I'm going to kill a patient and destroy my career"? No, nobody does that, right? But your constant confusion and grief starts to tell you those things. And so many people, and I understand their place, would consume the rest of their life in a vengeance against that surgeon, right? The truth is, and I will tell you it's 100% the truth, that this surgeon attempted to save my son's life and remove his pain. That was his intention when he went into the surgery room. He made a mistake, okay? And I know it sounds too idealistic and maybe a little too compassionate, but if you and I make a mistake on filming this podcast, the maximum cost on us is we're going to pause and start again, right? When a surgeon makes a mistake, they lose a patient, right? And I know I'm talking logic here, and logic is not present in those moments. But I think what happened to us was that, there is something known as the 5 stages of grief. You start from denial, and you go through stages that normally take people months or years, and eventually you end up in acceptance.
Do you though? Do you accept it? And do you feel like you're there?
Do you have any other choice? I mean, remember, acceptance is two layers. Acceptance is a layer of reality, okay? That you basically accept that your loved one is no longer there and live with your loved one not there. Believe it or not, we always get there, okay? As a matter of fact, we get there from day one. It's the new reality of your life, right? Acceptance mentally, though, is a choice. Right? And believe it or not, again, part of my cultural upbringing in an Islamic society, interestingly, Islam itself, unlike what most people understand about it because of modern day media, the word Islam itself means to find peace through the act of surrendering to the circumstances outside your control. Okay, that's the actual core of the whole thing. It's like there will be things that happen in your life that are not within your control. Surrender to those. Okay, and surrender here is, I call it committed acceptance. It's not the act of like, okay, I'm defeated, I lost. Okay, this is my new reality. My son left. I accept this new reality despite the pain, despite my wishes that it would be different, and then I commit to making my life a little better every day, okay? And that's truly the key. The key is that when Ali left, my brain attacked me and said, you should have driven him to another hospital. And I went back to my brain and I said, I wish I could drive him to another hospital. I don't have a time machine. I cannot go back and drive him to another hospital. So please give me a valuable, useful thought, okay? And believe it or not, 4 days later, my brain goes like, okay, how about we write what he told us in a book, okay? And make his essence alive. Like, yeah, great idea, brain. Great idea, brain. We're going to do that. We're going to write what he taught us in a book. And in that way, a tiny bit of Ali's essence lives on. Okay? If I tell you what he taught me, and then you tell your children, and then they tell their girlfriends and boyfriends, and their right? And somehow through 6 degrees of separation in 70 years' time, a tiny bit of Ali's essence lives everywhere. Okay? And wouldn't that be so much better than just hitting my head against the wall with grief for the rest of my life? Either way, interestingly, he's not going to come back. Do you understand this? This is the whole trick. The whole trick is that there is absolutely nothing you can do to bring them back. That's the acceptance bit. You have to acknowledge that truth, right? But then the commitment bit is, how can I make my world better today than it was yesterday? It's not, I'm not even attempting to go back to that last hug before he went into the operating room, okay? I'm just attempting to make today better than yesterday. And if you keep doing this over the years, I'll openly tell you, and I know it sounds really weird, that I've never been happier than I am today. Never been happier than I am today.
I actually feel like I could never be happy again. You know, my husband is slightly less emotional than me, and he has the approach of, that's life, it is what it is. But, you know, there must be so many of our listeners out there who are like me and if they were going through grief, what would be the first step in that healing process?
There's no step. So you being more emotional than your husband also means that you're more into being than into doing. Okay, so a big distinction between the feminine and the masculine is that the feminine is all a state of being. Okay, and feminine and masculine, by the way, is not gender identities. It's not sexuality. It's not body parts. It's a way of living. Okay, and the feminine is all about being. It's all about so the masculine would give charity. That's the doing. Okay, the feminine would be kind. The state of being. Right? And we all have feminine and masculine in us. We all can be kind, and we all can do charity. Now, the interesting thing about grief is that the first step is not to do anything at all. Nothing at all. Your first step is to be in this new place that you're in this new emotional state. Grief. Let it all out. Cry. Okay? Don't feel like meeting friends? Don't meet friends. Alice, my co-author on Unstressable, tells the story of losing her dad in a very similar way. It's the whole idea of how do you deal with all of that new configuration of life? Okay, let it be. Feel your emotions. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest topics of stress in our lives is that we don't allow ourselves to feel emotions. Right? Feel the emotion, let it be, let it take you over, cry if you want to, grieve as long as you want. But then there will be a moment when you tell yourself, it's quite interesting, first day after such a loss, you're not even able to sip a sip of water. Okay? Second day, life takes over. Start to drink water. Third day, you have a meal. Right? 2 weeks later, you're making love to your partner. So weird, huh? How instinctively wired we are to continue living. So once you get into that instinct, you have to tell yourself, and what else is instinctive within me? Okay? Can I continue to live, but rather than live in sadness, live in celebration of the life of that human that by definition, by definition, if you feel sad that they left, then you must have felt happy that they existed. Right? And can you remind yourself of that? Can I remind myself that the gift of having Ali in my life, Ali was not planned, by the way. He just popped up in our life, the biggest blessing ever. And somehow I take that for granted. I take 21 and a half years of heaven in my life for granted. Of course not. I celebrate. So when my brain tells me Ali died, you know what I do? I respond to my brain and I say, Ali lived. Don't forget that, okay? Ali died for 10 years now. He's lived for 21 and a half. And you know what? I would take the pain of losing him 100 times to get the joy of having him, okay? It's not a bad deal from life at all. You know what would have been a bad deal? What would have been a bad deal if he didn't come in the first place? That would have been a bad deal, okay? But having come, having blessed my life with so much love, so much wisdom, is something to be grateful for. Yes, it doesn't take away the pain of missing him. It doesn't take away the pain of losing him. But at the end of the day, it's still, all in all, if you put it all together, It's a mega blessing. It's a mega blessing to have those people we love in our life.
You talk about gratitude a lot, and I think that's one thing as human beings we don't do enough of. You know, we're never present. We're always rushing around, busy. You know, you've got to be here, there, everywhere. And, you know, it's not often we stop and be grateful and think, oh my God, what a gorgeous day. And look at my kids, hearing their laughter, hearing the birds sing. And, you know, it's definitely something we need to, you know, be more thoughtful about and, you know, practicing gratitude.
It is so interesting when you say this because, you know, the truth is, first of all, gratitude is the mother of all happiness, right? But it's also the mother of all truth. Like I normally tell people if you're stuck in traffic and complaining about it, okay, you're complaining about the negative side of the issue, right? But the positive side of the issue is that you're in a car. That car is not in a war zone, right? You're safe enough, probably fed enough to be able to complain about an issue that is so trivial. I call it, problems of privilege, right? I went to Ethiopia once. I went to Ethiopia many times, but I went to Ethiopia once. And I had a few business meetings. I don't know if you've ever been, but you land in Addis Ababa. And, I landed at around 1 a.m. in the morning. So it was dark everywhere. I get to one of the most luxurious hotels in Africa, right? Gold everywhere. And it's, just so fancy. I don't know, partners and customers come over to the hotel in the morning. We had the conference, the conference is done by 5 p.m. And I go out of that hotel, right? Complaining about all of the, the lengthy day and the arguments we had with the clients and all of this and that and so on. And then the minute you walk out of that hotel, it's slums everywhere. Tin houses, okay, where people barely have enough to eat. And then, our partner there basically said, let me take you on top of the mountains, the cleanest air in Africa. Yes, let's go. So we're having a conversation in the car. And next to me, I feel something passing by me, right? I'm looking at my partner, not looking at the window. There's like some big thing passing by us every 2 to 3 minutes, right? So I looked and I asked, what is this? Turns out this is a woman somewhere between age 10 and 65 who is completely bent under the weight of a massive pile of wood, okay? Where those women wake up in the morning, every morning at sunrise, they walk up the mountain, okay, to collect, dry wood, wrap it up in a pile, I promise you, that probably is 4 meters long, this 1 meter thick, okay? And then they walk down the mountain under the weight of that thing to deliver it to the workshops to use as fuel for their work, right? And they take $1 for that 9 or 10 hours of work, okay? And then they take that $1, they go buy food, go back home, cook for their families, cook for their asshole-ish husbands that haven't worked the whole day, okay? They basically feed them, and they're not allowed to eat until the family has stopped eating, and then they eat what's left. And I'm like, what? How horrible can life become? And yet we complain about the traffic. In reality, if you take context of our life, honestly, everyone should be running around screaming from gratitude all the time, right? Like if you look at every bit of your life, if you're just by definition born in the UK, you're more blessed than 90% of the world, right? If you're born in the UK and you have enough to eat and a roof on top of your head and a device to be able to watch this conversation from, you're luckier than 98% of the world. And yet we take the 2% and we focus on it. Why? Because our brain is a survival mechanism. It's supposed to look for what's wrong so that it can deal with it and survive rather than what's right. And so my practice is very straightforward. Every time my brain will tell me something negative, I'll say, okay, interesting. Yes, we're stuck in traffic. What is positive about this? What's positive is we're in a car. It's air-conditioned. We're going to an important meeting. Someone is interested in us, okay? We're fed. We're safe. It's not a war zone. It's not, and you can go on for hours. about everything that you can be grateful for. If you do that, suddenly life becomes a lot happier, not because it changed in any ways, but because you notice the reality of what it is.
I think it's almost hard for me to envision how such a traumatic event can almost have a positive effect on where you are in your life. You know, you've been pulled into this world of gratitude, and you talk about having your two lives and how, you know, there's a huge contrast to your time working with Google X to now living this unstressable life.
Yeah, I had a life at the beginning that is the typical successful entrepreneur or corporate executive, money pouring in, blessings everywhere. I had everything you could wish for, you know, big villa, swimming pool, two wonderful kids, beautiful wife, you know, luxury cars, everything you can think of, and miserable, totally miserable, stressed out, angry all the time, completely unhappy and unsatisfied with life. Right? And when you're in that situation, it's actually quite shocking. Why? Because you seem to have the resources to pour on the problem, but nothing changes. So you follow the world's promise. You know, the modern world promises you that if you go on a luxury vacation, you're going to be happier. The truth is, you go on a luxury vacation and then you receive an email and you're upset. The world tells you if you buy a fancy car, you'll be happier, right? And so you buy a fancy car and then you get in there and you go like, what stitching here is not perfect, and you're unhappy, right? It's not a question of what you get. It's, you know, in my first book, in Solve for Happy, I describe happiness with an algorithm. I say happiness follows an equation, right? Your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life, your perception of the events of your life, and your expectations of how life should be, right? And if your expectation is that life is going to be perfect all the time and it's going to be giving you a service level agreement where everything is always going to go to your expectation and your partner is only going to say loving things all the time and your kids are never going to try to smoke, and right? If that's your expectation, you're always going to be disappointed, right? The truth is life doesn't work that way, okay? And so at that time, I believe that this was the first turning point in my life. Was a Saturday morning, and I was in my home office, grumpy as always, looking at an email of some sort, and then my lovely daughter walks in, and she's jumping up and down, you know, from excitement. Mommy said we're going out. Are we going to go to this place? Can we play with this? Can we go have that ice cream? Can we have popcorn? Right? She's very, very happy, and I look at her and I go like, "Can we please be serious for a minute?" What's serious? She was 5. Like seriously, like what was going on in my brain, huh? And somehow I could see my daughter's heart break in front of my eyes. Okay, I could see her, you know, literally break down crying. Okay, and running out of the room, doesn't want to be happy anymore. You know, the day is ruined. And I locked myself and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, I hate this person. I don't want that person. Right? Between then and the time Ali left our world, perhaps 15 years later, or 14 years later, I learned, which is the interesting thing, I learned to find happiness, to find joy, to find peacefulness, to find calm, to find gratitude. These are skills that we learn. That constant negativity is a skill that we learn in the world. Right? That constant stress that we live through is not because of the events of life. It's because of the way we deal with them.
But how easy is it for just a normal, average person to just walk away from their job? You know, you had one of the most powerful jobs on the planet, working with Google X. You know, you've come from more of a privileged position than most, and which has enabled you to go off and write this book on how to be unstressable.
Yes, I mean, look, it's definitely not without doubt, right? But it also pays off to know what you want in life, okay? And I think we humans, we come in two varieties. We all experience the exact same things, especially those who go to success, right? I write in Solve for Happy, and you know, sort of I'm still ashamed of that moment in my life. But there was a moment in my life where I was frustrated and stressed. I went into eBay Motors in the US and I bought 2 Rolls Royces, right? Literally 2 clicks, 2 clicks, 15 minutes apart, both two Rolls Royces, right? Classic Rolls Royces, not the most expensive new ones, but still two Rolls Royces, not one, with a click, no inspection, nothing, don't care, right? They arrived, two beautiful cars. They arrived, 2.5 months later, right? I looked at them. I was like, oh, that's so pretty. I sat inside them. I started one of them. I drove around for 10 minutes and that was it. Why? Because when you sit inside the car, what do you see? You see the road. The truth of the matter is that if the car is good enough, which now is every car that's ever produced, is good enough, okay? The rest of the car is ego. You understand this, huh? And for some of us, what ends up happening is you buy the first car, it makes you happy for a day, and then you run out of that dopamine because it's not happiness. It's actually sort of the reward hormone in your body. Look at me, I've achieved. I bought a Ferrari, and then it doesn't give you happiness anymore. So you tell yourself, oh, it's because I don't like Ferraris. I want a Lamborghini, and then you buy a Lamborghini, and what happens is the Lamborghini makes you happy for 2 hours, and then you say, no. It's because it's not green. I need green. So you buy a green Lamborghini. To me, the truth is there was a moment in my life where I actually learned from all of my experiences that material wealth will never make you happy. That the only way, believe it or not, in my view, and I could be wrong, but the only way material wealth could make me happy is if I used it to make someone else happy. Okay? Because all of my needs are met. All of my needs. And my needs are actually not that big at all. It's a simple T-shirt and a good conversation with someone that I love and a reasonably healthy meal, not in a very fancy place. Fancy actually annoys the hell out of me. Like, why do I need a butler to just sit on top of my head? I don't like that. Okay, I want to have a person that I love, that we can laugh together and exchange thoughts together. It's wonderful. Okay, and once you get to that space, suddenly you realize something incredible. That you're trading the most valuable asset you've ever been given, which is your life, okay, for things that you don't need, which are cars and fancy clothes and connections to people that are obnoxious. And, it's quite interesting. The biggest asset you get is minutes. That's what you have. And we all sell those minutes to our employers or to our, work environment or to money in some way or another, okay? And forget that the minutes are much more valuable than the money. And once you get that realization, you start to tell yourself, look, I actually do need to continue to sell some of my minutes for money, but how many am I willing to give away, okay? And for how much? And then suddenly everything changes, right? And I have to say, if you've read my second book, Scary Smart, there was a very, very, very significant wake-up call for me. Because when I joined Google, I joined in end of 2007. Sorry, end of 2006, beginning of 2007. We were truly making the world a better place. Like if you think of what I did to take Google to 4 billion more people, imagine the democracy of knowledge and information that brought to the world. That's a beautiful contribution to the world. But technology is no longer fulfilling that promise. Technology today is causing as much harm, if not more harm, than the good that it brings. And there is a moment in your life where you go like, look, I joined this ride because I believed it was doing well for the world. Is this in line with my morality today? Okay. Is it in line with my morality to get people stuck to their devices? Is it in line with my morality to use their attention and time to make money on the ads that I show to them? I still believe that Google is one of the most ethical companies I have ever known, at least as far as I know. But technology in general is starting to become a burden on all of us. And that was a very important moment for me to decide to go where I am today.
It absolutely terrifies me, all of this AI stuff. And I know you've said previously that by 2045, AI will be 1 billion times smarter than humans. Have we created a monster?
We have absolutely 100% created our God, if you want. I mean, not God in a spiritual way, but the boss of the world has just been created. We've totally lost our humanity's ability to to have autonomy in our own decisions that affect humanity's future. And there's absolutely no turning back. It's inevitable. It's way beyond the point of no return. It will continue to advance. I'm now shifting my forecasts forward. So my forecast was 2029 is artificial general intelligence, where machines are going to be smarter than humans, right? And 2045 was 1 billion times smarter. I've moved that now to 2025 is artificial general intelligence, and 2037 is 1 billion times smarter. By the way, 1 billion times smarter or twice as smart doesn't make any difference at all. I mean, I've had the joy of sitting with some of the most prominent physicists in the world, where they're probably double my IQ, or maybe 40% or 50% more than my IQ. And I had no ability to even understand what they're talking about, let alone understand what it means. Okay? That's the difference that 50% IQ would give you. Okay? Advantage would give you. Now, imagine if AI is twice as intelligent as we are. Imagine if AI is 10 times as intelligent as we are. And there were hypothetical IQ tests done with ChatGPT 4, for example, that basically put ChatGPT at 155 IQ. Okay? 155 is Elon Musk, right? 164, if I remember correctly, is Einstein. Can you imagine that? And we're still arguing when will AI be smarter than humans? It's already happened. Okay? It's already, ChatGPT today is already smarter than most humans.
Yeah, all the kids are using ChatGPT in school. It's like, do they even need to go to school to learn now? Is it having a detrimental effect on education, do you think?
100%. It's exactly like how I was as an engineer. You know, until third year engineering university, we were not allowed scientific calculators, so I needed to do the arithmetics in my head. Post the third year engineering school, I never did the arithmetics in my head, complex arithmetics in my head ever again. Why would I? I mean, I have a scientific calculator that can solve the whole thing for me. This is exactly going to be the situation with artificial intelligence. Think of it this way. AI is going to become a utility, a plug in the wall, like an electric socket, where you plug into it and get 100 IQ points more.
Does the prospect of this make you stressed?
The prospect of the next few years definitely makes me feel stressed, for sure. If you really want to take a very top picture of what happened, Western societies have been printing money for ages. And that basically dilutes the currencies of the UK, the US, and so on, to the point where societies are suffering massive inflations that are not recoverable, sadly, in my mind, with fiscal policies. So there is nothing the government can do today other than print more money to be able to pay the debt. Okay? And as a result, your pound or dollar is worth less. And it's sad that we are approaching both of these. We're approaching an economic situation that is analogous to the Great Depression in many ways. It's the only time in history, the only other time in history where the Feds raised interest rate in the face of an inflation is now, and the Great Depression. And it seems to me that we're going to eventually end up in a place where the geopolitical landscape will be manufactured to justify a war, a bit like the weapons of mass destruction of Iraq, so that we can pull ourselves out of this. These are not easy times at all. These are very, very stressful times. And I think this is the main reason Alice and I are releasing Unstressable, is that mission that basically says, it's not the events that stress you, it's the way you deal with them that does. And so we have to teach our listeners, our societies, to be able to deal with such events in a way where the harshness of life does not lead you to break down and burn out and struggle under stress.
Are these the motivating factors behind you writing Unstressable, to manage expectations for society?
I don't know if you know the stats, but today 70 to 80% of all doctor visits are due to stress-related illnesses, right? It's quite significant. It is the pandemic of our time, okay? But at the time, we were writing with the expectation of a longer ramp, if you want, to the current challenges of geopolitical, the current challenges of economic, the current challenges of technology, and so on. But it so happens to be very timely, honestly. I mean, and we ramped up our mission. So our mission is 1 million people out of stress every year. We spoke about committed acceptance. There is a fact that our world is uncertain. Okay, more and more at a faster and faster pace. We have to accept that fact. We have to accept this as part of the hand we're going to be dealt in the next 3 to 4 years, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the world is going to be difficult or harsh or stressful, okay? These are choices that you make in response to the hand that you're dealt, okay? The big slogan of Unstressable is that it's not the events of your life that stress you, it's the way you deal with them that does.
So now we're getting on to the topic of stress. I think it's only right we invite your co-author in, Alice Law.
Hi.
Alice, thanks for coming on today to talk about your book with Mo, Unstressable, which is something I desperately need to be.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alice, of course, I know who you are. But for our listeners, please, can you tell us, who is Alice Law?
So I am, well, technically a stress management expert and a Reiki master, mindfulness practitioner, meditation teacher and speaker. But I really didn't think I was going to do this at all when I was growing up. I thought I wanted to be in fashion. I went to Leeds University to do fashion and then went to work for Net-a-Porter after uni and was still avid that I was going to be doing that, and then left Net-a-Porter because I wanted to start my own fashion line, had all these big ideas. I was like, right, I'll get a job on the side, go and be a PA whilst I'm earning some money and doing my line on the side. And then the universe guided me to basically learn everything I now teach everyone. So totally unexpectedly, I experienced loss in every aspect of my life all at once, like one thing after the other. And the first thing being that my dad, who was a successful entrepreneur, he started to really struggle with his company starting to financially struggle after the 2008 credit crisis. And I'd always grown up with a dad who was just, he was just so charismatic, so always knew, how to handle everything. He was the one you came to the problems with. He could just light up the room with his stories. He was just, wonderful. And that was the first time in my life I experienced him under stress, as it were, but it was only the beginning parts of his stress because my eldest half-sister, Suzanne, who was just, the best eldest sister we could have, she was diagnosed with cancer out of the blue. And so it was at that time, my dad's businesses was sort of really struggling. He was looking at selling our home and everything was really tumultuous in that way. And my eldest sister was, diagnosed with cancer. And we had a 4-year battle with her. She was incredible, so strong, and, won twice. And then out of the blue, when I was on my way to celebrate actually what should have been a weekend of us saying she was all clear again, she'd gone to do just a checkup 3 weeks before again for the all clear. And somehow within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, she was terminal. So that was obviously a huge, huge shock to our whole family. She had 2 children who were sort of 10 years younger than me. She was elder. We shared the same dad, not the same mum. And my dad, really struggled obviously with that. He'd actually had cancer when I was 3, but his twin sister had died of cancer at the exact same age his daughter was, with the exact same age children. And so he couldn't really get his head around how this was happening again to the 2 people closest to him in his life, his twin and his eldest daughter. And he really started to struggle mentally. And we devastatingly lost her 4 years after a 4-year battle. And it was, during that time that I was struggling hugely with stress myself. I used to wake up in the morning too anxious to look at my phone in case I had more bad news from my family. My dad was dealing with a legal case that he didn't see coming from people who he only managed to prove him wrong sort of much later down the line, and caused him so much stress. His companies had gone under. He'd had to sell our home. He'd lost everything financially and had lost his eldest daughter and was completely just broken. And it was 4 days after her funeral that he was rushed to hospital with a blood clot because he'd just been lying on his bed, just unable to sort of move in grief, and had a blood clot, rushed him to hospital. That was all fine, but they scanned his body and found that he now had cancer. And so it was in these weeks, after her funeral, after, everything that happened with my dad, and I was in such a bad way. I had severe IBS. My family was sort of holding it together. I was trying to, Mo talked about grief earlier and how that affects you differently. And I didn't really feel there was a space for me to grieve my sister at this point because I was so worried about my dad. I was so worried about her kids. I was worried about my mum looking after my dad. And I was just in total survival mode. And at that point, I had a bit of more stress, had a sprinkle of, a relationship that I thought was going well, ended out of the blue. And I then got made redundant when my company left the UK market. So I had stress from all aspects of my life at once and no security. And I was like thinking, okay, well, nothing's going to change. All of these things are truly, totally out of my control. I can't bring my sister back. I can't get my dad to have treatment because he was refusing it at this point out of depression. I can't, magically whisk up a load of money in my 20-something-year-old graduate self for my family. And I can't get my relationship to come back. So what can I do? The only thing I can do is change my own response and learn how to deal with this myself. So I started sort of self-studying at this point. Everything I now teach, like mindfulness and mindset work and meditation, energy. And I wanted to understand stress from like different aspects. And it started to really work and started to really bring me back to who I remember being growing up, like calm and happy. And then it was, 4 years after my sister died, that I lost my dad to stress-related illness. So he was correct. Like he always said, I'm not treating my cancer. It's not going to grow quick enough at my age. He was in his 70s at this point, and he was so crossed by life. He was like, I'm not spending the last decade of my life in hospital. And so I was already doing the work I was doing, but it was after my dad died, I really realized how important this was to me and how it affects not just an individual, but it affects a family. Stress is so contagious in that sense. And so when Mo and I met after my dad died, from being on each other's podcasts, and created this mission together to help take 1 million people a year out of stress. It's a total pandemic. I just speak to people every single week. There's not a single week that goes by where I don't speak to someone, whether it's a friend or someone you're in passing with, who says, I feel anxious, I feel stressed, or I'm a bit overwhelmed, or, even like I'm feeling down and a bit depressed. Like those are continual conversations that everyone has every week. And it's become this new normal. And so that's what we want to change.
Yeah. So can you talk us through how you're going to make this mission a reality?
You having us on your podcast is part of that, right? So the idea here is to provide the knowledge in book format, the knowledge for free in podcasts and other formats, social media formats, but also the community membership, where basically a lot of the content is described in training videos, in monthly webinars and so on.
So what is stress and why does it occur?
So stress is, it's a survival mechanism. It's amazing. Stress is not bad in the sense of like we're wired to be able to be stressed. It's quite literally what makes us get out of the way of a moving car. But what was once wired to, a tiger coming out of the bushes in the olden days, your fight and flight response goes on. You have your parasympathetic rest and digest, and you have your sympathetic nervous system, your fight and flight. And when your fight and flight goes on, your body gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, noradrenaline, adrenaline, and it sends the resources away that you need to thrive and sort of rest to what it thinks you need to survive. So like sending blood to your muscles, away from your stomach and digestion, getting the liver with glucose, all these different things, and basically making you into a superhuman and allowing you to essentially get out of the way if you actually had a real threat. But today, sadly, our system hasn't caught up with this. So our modern day life hasn't caught up, our system hasn't caught up to modern day life around us. So what used to set our stress response off only for life or death situations, now our stress response is being set off all the time from modern life. So the upsetting email, the annoying WhatsApp notifications, being stuck in traffic. And all these things just add up and add up and add up. And that's what leads us to chronic stress today, because it just builds up over and over time. And we're not actually spending the majority of our lives in rest and digest, in our parasympathetic state, where we can actually rejuvenate and our bodies can heal and we can digest our food properly and all those things we really need to not just survive, but to live well and to feel healthy.
God, I definitely think there's a connection between serious illness and stress. Illnesses like cancer. Would you agree?
I 100% think that. My sister used to say she had colon cancer, and she always used to say I used to hold all my stress in my stomach, like my worry, my anxieties. And I think the link between our emotional and physical, stress is huge.
Yeah, I think the truth is that, the prolonged reconfiguration of your body basically deprives some of your organs of the life they need to function properly. I mean, as Alice was describing, when you're flooded with cortisol, your number one priority is fight or flight. Okay, so you're in that constant fight or flight mode, huh? And that hypervigilance all the time. You're always looking around you. But yes, you're reconfigured. You're maybe getting more glucose in your brain. Your pupils are more dilated. You can focus a tiny bit more on the task that's threatening you. But at the same time, your kidneys are not functioning because they're completely deprived of blood. Your liver is not functioning because what's the point in digesting your food or processing your urine or whatever when you're about to be eaten by a tiger? Your body basically says, I don't care about any of this. I care about survival.
So what are the reasons? Why do we break?
So you see, the thing about stress is, as Alice was saying, it's actually a good thing. It's you're becoming superhuman. It's wonderful to become superhuman, right? The reason we break, is that prolonged or chronic stress, and it happens in our analysis for three reasons, right? One is trauma. So capital T trauma, like a massive amount of stress or challenge that happens over a very short period of time that exceeds your ability to deal with it. Believe it or not, trauma, even though it breaks us instantly, is not the reason for the pandemic. So, statistics will show you that 91% of us, 9 of every 10 people, will get a traumatic event in their life at least once in their life, sometimes multiple times, that is PTSD inducing. So it's the extreme of trauma, right? But 93% of them will recover within 3 months, right? 96% of them will recover, 96.7% of them will recover within 6 months, and most of them will enjoy post-traumatic growth. So trauma, interestingly, is not it's not what's killing us. What's killing us is two sides. One is one is burnout. We know that, right? And burnout is not the result of one big stressor. It's the result of accumulation of stress over time, right? So it's from that tiny little alarm that you get in the morning, all the way to your kids annoying you, all the way to your boss sending you an annoying email, and so on and so forth. None of those in itself would break you, but add 4,000 of them to your life every week, and you'll end up breaking. So that's burnout, right? The other one is what I call the anticipation of stress. The anticipation of threat, let's say, right? So most of the time we're struggling and we break because of anxiety, worry, and panic, okay? Not because we're challenged right now that we lost our job, for example. It's because we're worried we'll lose our job. We're anxious about losing our job. We're panicking because of the prospect of losing our jobs. The problem with anxiety, worry, and panic is that we treat them as fear when they shouldn't be.
And how do you differentiate between each of them?
Yeah, interestingly, so fear is focused on the threat that you're about to face. Okay? And so if I fear that I am going to lose my job, I'm going to either do something to stay employed, apply for another job, okay? Or maybe save money so that I can deal with the situation if I lose my job. That's your response to fear. Worry, that doesn't help you, because what if you're worried about losing your job and you start to save or look for another job, but you actually don't lose it, right? So what happens for us when we're worried is we're uncertain if the threat is going to happen or not. So we keep flip-flopping. We keep saying, maybe I should look for another job. No, hold on. Maybe I should double down and please my manager. Maybe I should look for another job. No, maybe I should double down and stay extra hours, right? You're undecided. And so, believe it or not, to respond to your worry so that you don't feel stressed, it's not about the job loss. It's about making up your mind. Okay? It's about you telling yourself, look, I'm either going to assume I'm going to lose it, and so I'm going to save money and look for other jobs. I've given up on that job. Okay? Or I'm going to assume I'm going to keep it, so I'm going to double down and work hard on it so that I keep it. Okay? That uncertainty, believe it or not, is one of the biggest reasons for stress in the world.
So would you say that's similar to the law of attraction then? If you say, my kids are going to be okay, they will be.
For sure, if you tell yourself that, by the way, you're going to work in that direction. Anxiety is more interesting. So worry is not about the threat. It's about your uncertainty if the threat is going to happen or not. Anxiety is not about the threat at all. When you feel anxious, okay, it's not because you're trying to deal with something that's scaring you. It's because you believe that you do not have the abilities and skills to solve it. So if you really dig deeper on the moments when you're anxious, it's not because I have a presentation on Thursday, it's because you believe you're not good enough for the presentation, right? So instead of trying to solve the presentation issue, try to work on your skills, okay? And you try to work on your skills in 3 ways. One way is to say, look, I actually have the skills, I'm just scaring myself. Or 2, you say, I don't have the skills, okay? I might as well develop them. I need to read something or learn something or whatever. Or 3rd, you can say, I don't have the skills, but I have a friend that can help me with those skills, okay? I can go to someone, there is a financial report I need to include in the presentation. It's stressing me. Find your friend who's an accountant who does this in their sleep, and they'll help you do that, right? So anxiety is not about the threat. It's not about the challenge. It's about your conviction that you have the ability.
God, that is so interesting.
Panic is more interesting. So because panic is also not about the challenge. Panic is a question of time. You feel panicked, okay, when you feel that the challenge is inevitable. Not inevitable, imminent. Right? So the shorter the time to the challenge, the more panicked you feel. Right? And so if you try to address the presentation issue, you're not going to lose the panic. You're thinking about time. So work on time. Again, 3 things. Either verify if you have enough time or not. Okay? Because sometimes your brain is just scaring you and you actually have enough time. Second is, if you don't have enough time, try to get some extra time by maybe canceling some appointments or staying up a little late to work on it. Right? And third is, if you can't do that, then find a friend that can help you so that you have double the capacity, you can finish in time. Okay? And it's always that. The problem with stress in general, and especially the anticipation of stress, is we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't have the skill to understand that dealing with things differently, right, makes you do things more effectively so that you can overcome your stress.
So in the book, you talk about the TONN model. Alice, can you talk us through that a little bit more, please?
With stress, you always have macro and micro, so those big things and smaller things. But what we wanted to look at as well was that half of those are external and half of them are internal, generated by ourselves. So 50% of the stresses in our life is what our mind actually creates. So a ton of stress is our model for those. So trauma is the T, which is those macro external events. They're the things that, blindside you on a Sunday, the things we talked about earlier in our stories that you have no control over. The death of a loved one, breakup, divorce, an illness, losing a job that was your only stability, all these things that are just out of our control. But that's the macro external. We can't do anything about those to limit them anyway. Then we have the macro internal, and that's the obsessions, is what we call. So an obsession is that story. It's that one narrative in your head that causes you stress, that just stays with you and continually comes in your head. So it's like if you have, if you meet someone and then it doesn't work out, and then you tell yourself for months afterwards, I'm always going to be on my own forever, I'm never going to find love. That's an obsession. It's that narrative that brings you down, that keeps you stressed all the time.
So that's the what if. What if that bus crashes? What if I lose my job? What if I get dumped by my boyfriend?
And then you have micro internal, which is noise. So noise is the little niggles. It's not that obsessive narrative that causes you loads of stress about one story. It's those tiny little comments littered about our days, negative, that we tell ourselves that they're one-offs. It's like me looking in the mirror in the morning saying, oh my God, your hair's frizzy. So like once on its own, fine. But, continually they add up and they become, a stack of stress. And then the final one is nuisances. So nuisances are micro-external, and they actually are the one thing that we have a huge power externally to limit. So nuisances are littered around. It's like we talked about earlier, your system going off in the modern world. Nuisances are everywhere. It's your aggressive morning alarm on factory setting that jolts you out of bed and gives you a dose of cortisol before you've even got up. It's that news headline that you watch 7 times over one day. It's your WhatsApp notifications, your social media feed, the traffic jam, all these things. Those are modern nuisances, so micro external stresses that cause our system stress that we don't even realize they do. We look at a TONN because you have to see where your stress is coming from. You can only change, what you're aware of. So you have to become aware of the stress. and look at where it's coming from to see, first of all, what we can limit.
Of course, you also need to work on your noise and obsession, right? So all of that internally generated stress that actually is not true at all. When you tell yourself, my hair is frizzy today, everyone's gonna think I'm my hair. Yeah, right. But that actually is not the truth at all. It's a script generated in your head. It's not even present in the real world. Then dealing with this requires you to go much deeper into your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. We call them modalities, the different forms of who you are as a human, because then you can start to understand where those things are triggered.
So what is the first step for someone dealing with stress? What could you offer them?
First step is always work out where your stress is coming from. Because like I said, you can't do anything about it until you know what you're dealing with. So it'd be looking at the TONN model and marking down, okay, do I have any traumas in my life at the moment that are causing me stress? If so, then, you look at how you can actually rest your body and deal with that in different ways that we can talk about, because you can't change the external, but you have to change your response. Then it's like looking at, okay, how many nuisances are actually in my morning? For starters, like noting down how many nuisances in your morning do you get, how many nuisances throughout your day, and how many of those could you actually limit? So looking at where you can limit what you then can't, what you can change before you can go on to dealing with those 4 parts of yourself, like Mo talked about. So list down on like a tally. I do like with clients, I used to sort of give them a clicker, be like, how many times a day do you actually notice these things? And list down how many do you have in your day? Do you have 1 million WhatsApp notifications that you need to do something about? Do you have 1 million emails that are upsetting you all throughout the day? Do you watch the news 7 times a day? Do you, just get stuck in traffic? Just note down all the things that you actually could change. So once you're aware of it, then look at, okay, how can I make those better? Can I put my morning alarm? I wake up to the most soothing meditation song every morning that gets me out of bed, because one stressor is that morning alarm. It like jolts you out of bed. You feel stressed immediately.
It's horrible. It's horrible. I wake up to my kids like, Mom, can I have your phone? I want to play on Roblox. At like literally 5:30 every morning. That's my alarm clock.
I don't know if Unstressable has an answer to kids at all.
Yeah, I reckon we just leave them out of it.
I would, however, say, if you don't mind me saying, Alice, actually, you wrote that bit. The first step is to stop thinking that it's okay to be stressed. One of the biggest issues with the modern world is that we've hyper-normalized stress. We even sometimes wear it as a badge of honor. It's like, yeah, I'm so stressed because I'm busy and important. Right? I'm needed. This is why so many things are happening in my life. And because I'm needed, that means I'm okay, I'm safe. Right? That's wrong. The very first step is to tell yourself, I'm not supposed to be this way at all. I'm not supposed to have those aches and pains. I'm not supposed to be hypervigilant. I'm not supposed to be anxious all the time. I'm actually supposed to wake up in calm and peace. Okay? I'm supposed to feel good in my body. I'm supposed to, to not have those racing thoughts in my head that wake me up at 4 a.m. in the morning. You have to acknowledge that this is not right. When you're stressed, you're supposed to recognize that sensation. It has a physical signature in your body. And you say, that's not right. I need to do something about it.
Do you think stress manifests itself the same in both men and women?
The way it turns up in our system is the same. We have the same signals in terms of, mental stress, emotional, physical, spiritual. They all show different signs of being stressed. So mental stress looks at, really racing thoughts. You're constantly ruminating about the past, worrying about the future. You have trouble concentrating. You have trouble sleeping, trouble focusing. You're constantly in your mind rather than in the present. Emotional stress turns up as looking at, to behavioral and also feelings. So feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, feeling irritated and snapping at loved ones because the last thing they did was, the straw that broke the camel's back, and looking at things like, your memories dwindling, behavioral changes like overeating or losing your appetite, not being able to sleep, actually losing your libido. All these different things are emotional stress, but you could, obviously the feelings of emotional, when we're not connected to our emotions, we don't connect to the feelings of them. So people can sort of suppress their emotional sides of sadness, depression, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, irritation. And you can look then at the behavioral signatures that we talked about. But then your physical body, again, men and women have the same for this. It's looking at things like headaches, digestive issues, things like IBS, stomach ulcers, backaches, neck aches, having trouble sleeping again. Then your spiritual stress shows up in two ways as well, which is one side is when you feel totally disconnected from your own sense of self. So you cannot answer the question of who you are beyond a label, without saying like, I'm a dad, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher. You don't know who you are, beneath that, and what actually fills you up as a sense of purpose, as a soul, away from what the world's telling you to be, who you actually want to be. But those four parts of you, they have these stress symptoms. And this isn't just for men and women, actually. I think we all have different stress languages. And one of the big differences in men and women is that men tend to withdraw a lot in stress and want to really go into themselves and not deal with it. And women want to, obviously, like, we're more emotional naturally, and we want to, deal with it, talk about it, and kind of get ahead of our stress, so to speak, particularly if you're, having a conversation with your partner and you're having an argument and then that person wants to go away and this person wants to talk. Our stress languages can be completely different.
So I think that the question, men and women, is a very critical question, because what is men and women now in today's world? If you talk about biological male and female biologies, right? There was a study done in rats around, they would put the rats in water, okay? And they would see how long the rat will continue to swim until it surrenders, right? And let's go. And interestingly, the female rats would last a lot longer, okay? Yes. Of course, that's related. That's absolutely. I mean, we totally understand that. The tolerance of pain, for example, for the female biology is much higher than the tolerance for pain in the male biology, right? The thing is very interesting, though. There is a difference between masculine and feminine. And masculine and feminine is not gender identity, is not body parts, it's not biology. Okay, the masculine tends to do, and the feminine tends to be, and these are ways of living. They are choices of how you want to live. Okay, the masculine will tend to think that more than feel. The feminine will tend to feel before you think, right? Before you think, and it's quite interesting when you apply those choices to stress. You would recognize that when we're stressed, we tend to do more of what we know what to do best. Okay. Remember, once again, masculine and feminine is not body parts. You could have someone in male body parts that acts feminine and prefers to go through life in a feminine way. If the choice is feminine, then the stress will manifest more in emotional stress. Okay. It will trigger more mental noise that triggers more emotions. So you would see that the feminine will overthink things or incessantly think things more. The masculine, man or woman, doesn't matter. If you tend to be more on the masculine behavior side, you'll turn stress into action immediately, and you might actually overdo the action. You might not think the actions through very quickly. You might become aggressive. You might become pushy. You might become loud. All very masculine traits. Or all overdoing masculine traits, right? And I think the most interesting side of this is can we actually acknowledge that we all handle stress differently, right? So I'm, for example, a total failure at showing up on time in London. Okay, total failure.
You are, yeah.
I think that's a man thing, though, Mo. Honestly,
the way I handle it is I simply tell myself openly, look, I'm going to suck at this. Others will handle it by leaving half an hour earlier, right? And arriving half an hour earlier just to avoid the stress of being late. And it's okay to acknowledge your own ways of dealing with it. What's most important is that you actually deal with it. You acknowledge that it's stressing you and you actually deal with it.
So I actually did your online stress test, and yeah, I'm flabbergasted by the results, to be honest.
So let's read it for the listeners. 46% spiritual stress, 62% physical stress, 76% emotional stress, and oh my God, 92% mental stress. Okay, we love you. We need to change this, Abbey, honestly.
Guys, this is exactly why you were number one on my hit list and why I needed you on my new show. because I've been talking to you both for just over an hour or so, and so many things that you guys have said, I've recognized within myself, and, you know, just these simple changes that I could make to my life to make it unstressable, you know, I really want to do. And hopefully it should be an easy thing to do.
It is an easy thing to do, but it does take practice. So one of the most important parts of the work we've done in Unstressable is that, as I said, Unstressable is not to de-stress you. It's to give you the fitness you need to become unstressable. Now, fitness takes time. Just like your body would, if you decide to go to the gym after 2 years of not going, your body will take time to become fit again, right? Your mind, if you're talking about mental stress, for example, through neuroplasticity, will take time to change its habits, right? We in Unstressable, we write about what we call the mind gym. Gym is GYMMMMMM. So it's 6 M's, right? And the gym is a set of practices that if you do frequently, not to deal with your stress today, but to be able to deal with stress in general, okay? These are things that take time to change, So I would probably say, if I look at your survey, your quiz results, I don't know, Alice, but I'd probably say that you think all the time. You're constantly, incessantly thinking. And those incessant thoughts trigger a lot of emotions, right? And emotions. Interestingly, of course, Alice will say differently, but in my yin and yang approach between us, my masculine view of emotions is that emotions need a concept or a thought to be triggered. Right? To worry, you need to suspect a threat in the future. Okay? So if you reframe your thoughts, you reframe your emotions. And I think everyone listening would benefit from doing the quiz on unstressable.com. So go to unstressable.com/quiz. There is always a bigger one. And when I and Alice did ours, it was very, very clear, right?
Yeah, you always have a primary. So like Mo's saying, Abbey, your primary is mental. But because emotional stress is so high as well, as in 76 to 92, you will also create thoughts based on how you feel, because you're an emotional person. So if you're feeling a certain way, you'll then have thoughts about, oh my God, your thoughts are being weighed on how you're feeling, if that makes sense. So you're like creating, it's like that reinforced loop. So you would definitely start with your mental stress and emotional stress at the same time. Because if you deal with your mind, which you can absolutely do, like learn how to squash your negative thoughts, pattern interrupt, and then you don't deal with the emotional side, your emotions will keep triggering you to go back into that sort of like negative loop with your head. So you always have a primary, like Mo said. Like Mo's primary is always his physical, mine's my mental as well. That's the one I have to work on the most. And I think that's quite a common thing for a lot of people. Like we have 80% of our thoughts are primed to be negative unless we do something about it, because of our survival mechanism with our brains. We're wired to look for threats. So that's the reality. It's like, okay, if we're 80% primed for the negative and we do nothing about it, that's when we can create huge mental stress, because then that's what gets stronger. But then if we pattern interrupt and start to look at, okay, how do I change that? How do I actually become aware of my thoughts and start to tell them what kind of start to tell my brain what kind of thoughts I want, start to become aware of what thoughts I'm having. That's when we can change it with things like gratitude and wiring it to the positive and bring the mental stress down.
It's actually a really draining existence, being in like a constant state of fear or feeling anxiety or stress. And I think I'm a pretty intelligent person, but when it comes to managing myself and my own thoughts, I find that quite a difficult task.
You see, fear is the most irrational of all emotions. You have to understand that. The purpose of fear is to exaggerate the possible threats so that it keeps you safe, right? A great example of that is the heart of a mother. If your son or daughter would catch a flu once or twice in winter, you would tell your husband, your son's been sick all winter. We have to do something about this. All winter is not the truth, okay? All winter is not the truth. It's your mind's attempt to gain your attention by exaggerating the threat, right? Now, Alice, I know will tackle this differently, but I tackle everything with rationality, right? And the way to look at rationality, to rationalize fear, is to ask yourself accurately and say, how often did my biggest fear ever come true? And the answer is never, or rarely ever, okay? And more interestingly, if it has ever come true, you're still here, which means you had the abilities and resources to deal with it, okay? And so most interestingly, so in Solve for Happy, in my first book, I wrote a chapter about fear, where I was basically saying, look, I called it the interrogation. So there are questions you can ask your mind to get to the reality of fear, okay? Is what I'm fearing actually true? Is it likely to happen? What's the worst case scenario? But more interestingly, what's the best case scenario if that fear happens, right? And can I deal with it if it happens? The truth, if you take stock of all of our fears, is that they rarely ever come true, and yet your brain jumps to the next fear as soon as this one passes. Okay. Oh, my son is going to fall and hurt his knee. Oh, no, he didn't fall. My daughter is going to fall and hurt her head, right? And you just move from one to the next when none of them actually happens, and we never really keep a log that none of them happened, right? The ones that happen, we deal with them, and we don't keep a log that we're capable of dealing with them, okay? And so in reality, is there anything really to be afraid of? Yes, there are things you need to be cautious about and plan for them. But most of our life, we're okay.
No, I sort of agree, but you also have to always look at, the emotional side. And actually, when we were talking about the difference between men and women and stress earlier, a lot of that comes from just the standard thing in the modern world of men being programmed to not, want to feel their feelings. And that's why the biggest killer, sadly, for men under 50 now is suicide, above cancer, above diabetes, everything, which is just staggering. And as, women, you're taught to go inward, men, you were taught to go outward at an early age. It's like throw a ball, or girls, it was like, sit still and be with your feelings. And so I think that difference, obviously, is like generalized, but the reality is that it's more natural for most women to feel than it is for men. An emotion, a negative emotion, I don't even want to call it negative, an uncomfortable emotion, because an emotion isn't either good or bad. It's just trying to alert you to something. And it's never, an emotion never lasts forever. It's always transient. Have you ever felt the same way for your entire life?
No, I haven't.
No, exactly. So emotion always moves, but we kind of get stuck into the negative ones thinking it's going to last forever, and we push them away. And what happens with our emotions is the less attention you give a negative feeling, the more attention it wants. So it will literally keep reappearing, trying to get your attention. Please just, look at me. And so, I always say that a negative emotion is only ever trying to alert you to one of two things: something outside of yourself that you need to take action on and change, or something inside of yourself that you need to process and heal. That's it. It's not there to, hurt you. It's there to alert you. And so when we can actually become more in tune with our emotional language and be brave enough to go into that feeling, the quicker that feeling subsides. So everyone knows that feeling of feeling anxious, but what do you do when you feel anxious? You do everything you can to distract yourself outwardly instead of sitting in your body and actually feeling the anxiety, because that feels way too uncomfortable. I always look at a starting point as like which, where, why, and what. So like being brave enough to sit still, take a deep breath, ask yourself, okay, which feeling am I feeling? Where am I feeling in my body? Why might I be feeling that? Because that's something that we never actually connect to the two. It's like, okay, I'm anxious, but okay, why are you feeling anxious? Or why are you feeling overwhelmed? And then what can I actually do about it? What can I then change about this? Or what can I do to help soothe myself? And then once we know where things are coming from, we can change it, but also our emotions actually become soothed because we've given them the right attention.
Isn't it lovely to have a yin and yang look at the top?
So, yeah, it's like having the good and bad fairy.
Yeah, and I would have never written this in a book ever.
In the book, you talk about the important role nature plays in soothing stress. And this is honestly something I can really relate to. I love walking my dogs. I think my happiest place is when I'm out horse riding. That's the one place where I have no anxiety, no worries, no stress. I just love it.
It's because you're totally present. It's like mindfulness at its best. It's like you have to be present because you have to pay attention to the horse. Otherwise, the horse might run off or whatever it is, So you're totally, in the moment. Yeah, Mother Nature is, nature is, first of all, like it's the most natural way, one of the most natural ways to put our body into parasympathetic state, into that rest and digest, because it's how we naturally are. We're part of nature and we've built ourselves into the lives of cities and such chaos. But our system is craving like that simplicity of what nature can give us. And so, we even know from studies that if you look at a broad horizon view in nature, like the sea or, a landscape with a broad horizon, and you stare into the distance, that naturally puts your body into parasympathetic state alone. So, all these things with nature are so incredibly calming to us. Nature's there to soothe our system so much. And one of the first things, like, if you, and everyone, even if you're in a city, you have a park near you, everyone has some form of nature near them. And if you can make it a habit to try and just be around nature every day, even for just 10 minutes, that has such a huge effect on your system.
The truth is we're more safe in nature than we are in cities, believe it or not. And, I hosted two guests I had on my podcast who were so incredibly eye-opening. I don't know if you remember the Oscar winner, my octopus teacher. So I hosted Greg Foster on my podcast, and I, he used to dive every day in 12 degrees Celsius. Like if it's 12 degrees, you wear a jacket, and right, he was diving every day in 12 degrees Celsius, and in water that is freezing when you're in water. And I was like, Greg, this is so unnatural. How did you do that? That was my question, and he responded almost angrily. He had just won the Oscar. Okay. And he responded almost angry, and he said, this is unnatural. What you guys are doing is unnatural. Like to be standing in front of cameras and people asking you questions, and, to have to be in cars for long times to go through transportation. We are of Mother Nature. This is our nature, right? I hosted Jimmy Nelson, a very dear friend of mine who's an amazing artist who goes to basically indigenous tribes. Okay. He spends 6 months camping in front of them until they get used to him. And then he asks them if he can take one picture on film. Unbelievable, huh? One picture on film to represent what they stand for the most. Okay. And that process takes like months and months. And he tells me, I asked him, of course, he's a very good friend. I said, Jimmy, are those people stressed or unhappy? Do they know depression? And he said, they have no idea what the word means, right? And I said, how come? He said, I had this tribe whose most, representative moment of who they are is to wear their war gears, okay? And stand in front of the big waterfall that feeds their tribe, their village with water, okay? But the waterfall was a day walk away. So we woke up in the morning, they dressed in their war gear, they went to the waterfall. It took us a full day, so the light wasn't right for the picture. We had to sleep there so that we take the picture the next morning. And he said, we slept on bare rock behind the waterfall, incredibly noisy, right? Incredibly loud and very cold. And he said, best sleep of my life. Right? And it's quite interesting because we are of Mother Nature. Like Greg said, we're not visiting. We are of Mother Nature. Once you go back to Mother, you feel safe.
So we've talked about how nature can play a role in soothing our stresses. What about diet?
Our diet with stress, it plays a huge part in our physical stress, because we know that sugar, for example, puts stress into our system. Alcohol puts stress into our system. And I'm no angel. I love a glass of wine. Mo doesn't drink, so I can't say that. But, we know that when we're really stressed and you reach for a glass of wine as your stress relief is the first point, it's the first thing your mind wants. It's the last thing your body needs, because it just puts more stress in our system. We'll have that immediate sort of sedative relaxation. And then later you'll get a terrible night's sleep and you'll have more stress the next day. And so, what we put into our body really matters. When it comes to food, and if you're under severe stress or just in general, it's really important to look at anti-inflammatory foods.
Yes.
Because when your system is under chronic stress, you've had so much cortisol in your body just constantly that we become very inflamed, and we become sort of like a breeding ground, like we talked about earlier, for disease and, illness. And so to help counteract that, we have to look at like anti-inflammatory foods. So things like no sugar, if you're doing the extreme, you do like no sugar, no alcohol if you're under extreme stress, but then looking at things like actually no complex processed carbohydrates. So if you're under severe stress, have just sweet potatoes, for example, instead of like starch, because that's inflammatory. And then obviously your digestive system, like a probiotic, is such an important part of like supporting your body in stress. When I was really stressed, I had severe IBS, like I told you earlier, and they were worried I had colon cancer as well, like my sister, because my IBS was so intense. They were like, oh God, well, your family history, we probably should check that as well. And so that was obviously a very stressful period. I thought I had cancer myself, and they checked everything and then came back and said, you luckily don't, but you've got severe IBS. And I was like, my God, this is just crazy how much inflammation you can cause in your body. So I then looked at, they said you have to go on probiotics, and probiotics were just such a huge game changer for me for like stomach issues with stress. And you can get a good probiotic, like, get your doctor to advise you what probiotic you can get, but also probiotic foods, things like kimchi and kefir and sauerkraut. Those are all so supportive of the gut. And, we have a huge connection with our gut-brain axis and like our stress chemicals telling, our stomach can quite literally tell your body it's stressed.
People are so set in their ways, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s listening to this. Is it too late to make these changes now?
So the physically stressed chapter, I love the title of it. It's called "Your Hips Don't Lie." The chapter was written by Alice, and I edited it. I was on my 2022 annual retreat, so I take 40 days of silence away from people every year. And I promise you, I wrote back to Alice. I had to break my silence, right? I wrote back to Alice on day 3. I said, every single symptom of the chapter is available on me. Okay, every behavior is part of what I behave. Okay? And when I do my stress quiz, physical stress is my highest, right? And so I said, Alice, so what do I do? And she said, anti-inflammatory. I was 55 then. Okay, and I ordered a sort of a food plan that was anti-inflammatory for the 40 days. Within a week, remember, I had chronic headaches for maybe 24 years, okay? Gone. Back pain, gone. Joint pain, gone, right? I had digestive issues and IBS-like issues for years on end. Poof, gone, right? And it's quite interesting, huh? Inflammation feeds on itself. So when your body is inflamed, you're causing your body enough stress to cause more inflammation. So you have to go cold turkey, like no sugar, no gluten, no dairy. Do it for 21 days, once in your life. Okay? Add natural probiotics and thank us later. I promise you, it will flip your life upside down. There is so much more joy that I find today. Throughout my life, one of my biggest pleasures was a cookie with my coffee in the morning. Okay? And it's a big joy for me, but the joy of no muscle pains, no joint pains, no back pains, no neck pains is much bigger.
So what would your anti-inflammatory last supper meal be?
I mean, if you eat meat and fish, like one of the easiest things is to do like, a simple, like I love like cod, for example, with like sumac over the top. As strange as that is, it sounds like such a strange herb. It just makes it really tasty.
Oh, it's tasty that.
Yeah, it's so tasty. Put that in the oven with like some olive oil, have some vegetables, have some sweet potatoes, have some broccoli. That's just like the simplest like anti-inflammatory main course you can have. Do you know what I mean? But like you can also make delicious like anti-inflammatory cookies that are still technically anti-inflammatory for like your sweet stuff. So, we talk about sugar there. You can actually have non-processed sugar. So things like honey and agave and, dates, for example. So making like cookies out of, almond flour with, agave syrup and really dark chocolate that's like over a certain percentage for all the crumbs and stuff like that with some salt. Like I'll give you the actual recipe, but it's somewhere on my computer. But, those kind of things are actually still giving you like the sweetness. Even though you're not allowed sugar, you can have like the natural ones instead. Yeah.
Guys, I'm literally completely in awe and I'm going to start my anti-inflammatory diet tomorrow.
It really does work, Abbey. It really does. And the rewards you get are so much more valuable than the bad habits we pick along the way. Once you wake up one morning feeling calm and peaceful, not physically stressed, not emotionally stressed, thinking straight, connected with your purpose, you suddenly go like, how did I waste my life on anything else? This is the truth. The truth is, as I said, when you asked what's the first step to dealing with your stress, the first step is to get one day in your life feeling unstressed, and then say, "Oh my God, why would I ever trade this for anything else?"
Stress seems to be so endemic now. What do we need to do to fix this?
I will tell you openly, and I know Alice will also have different views, but I will tell you openly, I believe that our world is heading into a very stressful era. Right? We're going to be really, we need to be top of our game to navigate this without being too stressed. My real issue, and I'll be very open about it, is that when we're stressed, we misbehave, right? And if we start to misbehave, we're going to cause more stress for each other. We're going to make things a lot more difficult for everyone, okay? And I really think that it's actually a lot. We would have a much better world if we work on our own selves so that we're calmer, we're kinder, we're more compassionate as we deal with more challenging times.
Yeah, I mean, I agree totally. And then the impact of stress today, stress has been actually a silent growing pandemic for way too long. People are now starting to take it seriously, but not enough people have taken it seriously to actually make a big enough impact yet. But equally, the reality is that, if you are stressed as a member of a family or as a member of a community, even as, in your office, stress is contagious, not just to you, but to everyone around you. We even know that with studies, like you can actually realize that stress, the cortisol hormone if I'm stressed and I'm around someone, that will ignite their stress response as well, because cortisol seeps through the skin. And so we know this, so we can stress each other out just by being stressed around each other, even if we're not saying horrible things, just the kind of energy and the chemicals of stress do. So how do we take that personal responsibility? Like Mo said, you have to take responsibility for your own stress to have a greater effect and calm a world. And until everyone takes that unique responsibility with stress, we're going to be in such a bad place. Like Mo said, when you understand yourself, mind, body, heart, soul, you don't see stress as a problem. You become unstressable because you know you can handle it and you can come back from it. But if we're stuck in this spiral, then we're always going to be living in that, less than happy state. And that's just not how we're meant to be.
Guys, thank you both for coming on today. I have absolutely loved this. I feel like I've learned so much about myself. I'm excited to make some of these changes, that I've learned from your book and apply them to my own life and myself. And I just wondered if you could give our listeners one last takeaway, one piece of advice. What would that be?
I'd probably say that living stressed is not living. Again, one of the slogans of this book is that you tend to get used to it, to accept it, but it's not the life you want to live at all. Okay, you tend to be told that it's okay, and so you just get on with it, but it's not okay. I think Unstressable, more than the techniques, which, believe it or not, we believe are easy, okay, is a wake-up call. It really is. Wake up, don't live that way. This is not the way you should live, okay? And I think if you take it as such, as I'm not going to accept my life to be this way, you'll be surprised how far you can go when you start to change.
Yeah. And I would also just say that, a lot of us leave stress to breaking point. We wait to be in hospital, we wait till we break down. And stress is actually as much prevent more than cure. As stressful really is, like Mo was saying earlier, it's about that prevention side. Don't let yourself get to breaking point. Allow yourself to develop the skills you need so that you don't ever reach that point and you can become unstressable.
Guys, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved having you both on, and I am so excited to start my journey into an unstressable life. I feel so inspired, motivated, and, anyone listening, go out, get the book, because we're all on this mission together. Thank you again.
That's amazing. We really loved the conversation. I honestly think it was one of our favorites. And maybe one stress hack is to come on this podcast. It's actually quite enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been so nice. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.